the time. You know, it is interesting to hear the different talk about what the president can and should do. I mean, you know, for somebody like Marco Rubio, who obviously is going to be a big player in this, should he just invite these folks over to the White House and have a conversation? What should happen here, Matt? You know,
this has to happen. I mean, bills originate in Congress, so that has to emanate from the Congress eventually. But the problem is, this is the way politics and deals are getting done right now, in front of cameras, and people are trying to make issues out of it. Another problem is that this is comprehensive, right? The reformers made the deal of it has to be comprehensive immigration reform. The bigger the deal, the bigger the bill, the harder it is to get things passed, and the harder it is for everyone to swallow bits of it. You could chop this up into smaller parts and get something done. Recognize that this is kind of a prohibition problem, because we have prohibitions on what kind of immigrants can come in. If you increase the pool of immigrants who can come in illegally, a lot of this problem goes away, and it's, I think, a shame that both sides aren't focusing more just on that piece of it, which doesn't have to get into the other ones.
Sure. What are the chances this doesn't become comprehensive immigration reform, which everyone says that they want to get it all done, and it becomes something smaller bits and pieces, which again does seem to be in many instances how Congress works these days?
It does, but I just don't think that's likely. I think Congress really wants to have, you know, put a nice big blue ribbon on it and say we passed a big package dealing with immigration reform. You know, Congress has not been very productive in these last couple terms, in part mostly because of the partisan makeup of it. But in terms of incremental legislation like that, small pieces, something for border security, something for to give undocumented workers a pathway to citizenship, I just don't see it passing in itty-bitty pieces like that. I think it has to be a big package with a bow on it.
And when we talked about the demographics, and we all know and have talked ad nauseum about the numbers from the last election, how much of whether this gets done or not will be driven by that simple fact, that political fact, as opposed to the knowledge that we've needed to do something about this for a while?
Both, you know. It's politics. It's not a pretty business, and people are in it to try to get reelected. And Republicans right now are in a total panic about their prospects as a party going forward if they're going to be seen as the party of old white dudes. So they are motivated to make a deal right now. And again, the open question is, do Democrats want to make that deal, or do they want to have the issue?
Well, and people who are perceived as leaders on this issue, like Marco Rubio, who may have presidential ambitions, that's something else altogether that plays into this, Shira.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Marco, you can't underestimate how integral Marco Rubio is to this entire process. If he drops out of these bipartisan negotiations, I think the package is kaput. Absolutely done. He is just so important. And Republicans have really put him up as a pedestal to really be their guide throughout all of this. Let's remember, in the near future, Republicans don't need to win the Hispanic vote. They never need to win the Hispanic vote. They just don't need to lose it as badly. And that's the reason why they don't need to be leaders on this issue necessarily, but they need to go along and make it look like they're doing something to help solve this problem.
Shira Toeplitz, Matt Welch, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, even though a vote won't happen for at least another week, Chuck Hagel's fight to become the next defense secretary should end in confirmation. Senator John McCain, who's been a vocal Hagel critic, says they've had their say and now Republicans shouldn't hold things up any longer.
We will have a vote when we get back, and I'm confident that Senator Hagel will probably have the votes necessary to be confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. We have an obligation of advice and consent. I don't intend to give those up when other senators continue to have reasonable questions, and I mean reasonable.
But you're not a yes vote for your old friend.
No, I don't believe he is qualified, but I don't believe that we should hold up his nomination any further.
Coming up, we'll discuss Chuck Hagel's nomination with someone who's been through the process, former Energy Secretary Bill Richardson, who also just got back from a trip to North Korea.